Hi, I'm George Thornton. I'm an advanced Cicerone and national ranked BJCP judge, and today I am here to try Thornbridge, Jaipur. So here we have Jaipur from the brewery Thornbridge, which opened up around 2005, and this became their flagship IPA and is now listed on the BJCP guidelines for English IPA. So we're going to do a bit more of a BJCP style walkthrough on this beer, so the review might be a little bit longer. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to try to kind of proceed as if you and I were studying for the BJCP exam and we had this beer in front of us, and I'm going to try my best to be thorough about calling out each line or each aspect of what the BJCP score sheet would ask us to identify. So in terms of all of the aspects of the appearance, the aroma, the flavor, the mouthfeel, and the overall impression. And then I'll read along just some of the kind of highlights of the BJCP style guideline, which I have with me here, just to see, first of all, does this actually fit that category, which it ought to, because it's one of the beers that they list as an example. But so really in this case, since we know it fits because they list it, it's more to see, okay, what is it about this beer that makes this beer an English IPA? So what can I take from my tasting and my analysis of this beer, and then compare that with the descriptions that the BJCP is using for this style, and really remind myself, okay, this is an English IPA because of these quality or these quantity sort of markers, and therefore, okay, what is really an English IPA, and how does drinking this beer help me sort of lock that in my mind, so that if a customer or a brewer is asking me to identify, whether or not a beer is a good example of an English IPA, or say a customer is asking me to just explain, what is an English IPA, I have a pretty good sense or a pretty good feeling for, I know how to describe that because I've tasted this beer, or at least examples from this category, and thought about it in terms of, okay, what is it that makes this style what it is, and kind of get inside the mindset or the thought process for why the style needed to be created, or why at least the creators and editors of the BJCP thought, this is a pretty distinct subset of beer that's happening here, or category of beer. Let's make a separate category for it. So without further ado, we'll get right into it. So this is the English IPA, which is category 12C according to the BJCP 2021. And at some point, I am going to make a video that sort of defends the need or the use or the function of the BJCP. I find that sometimes I'll see little memes or little things in the nerdy beer world that like to make fun of or poke fun at the BJCP, or maybe say it's like they're trying to control beer styles, which I don't want to get into that now, but I would say that's actually the opposite of what the function is of the BJCP. So usually when people are mad at the BJCP, it's because they don't even understand what the BJCP says they're trying to accomplish. So I digress. So let's get into the beer. Now, the first thing on a BJCP form could be it'll be aroma and then appearance. I tend to go aroma and then flavor, and then I might work my way back up to appearance, maybe even after I do the mouthfeel. So I might do appearance very last. But I want to start with the aroma, because volatile compounds like sulfur, etc., might escape pretty quickly, especially since I'm swirling the glass. I might be encouraging some of these compounds to escape. Now, so I want to make sure that I'm actually taking advantage of those compounds being in the glass. So I do get a little touch of minerality and sulfur and some hop characteristics, etc. So let me put on my BJCP sort of brain, because I need to make sure that I call out intensity and descriptions for every single component. So for aroma, the first thing that stood out to me was the hop characteristics. So I'm going to say, okay, let's describe the hop characteristics. What's the intensity of the hop characteristics? So of all beers in the world, the intensity of the hop characteristics here, I would say, are medium plus. And I would describe those as like burnt orange peel, orange pith, lavender, rosemary, earthy, spicy like black pepper, dried herbes de Provence, and pine needle. Okay. So I have a medium plus hop aroma with those descriptions. So that's what I would want to write on the BJCP form. I would want to be as detailed as possible, fill out that line. Next, I need to comment on the malt. Always mark your intensity, so my malt intensity, medium minus. And it reminds me of biscuit, like a shortbread cookie, not the butter though. Lightly toasted white bread, low honey, dinner roll, raw dough, and very low caramel. So I have this medium-low malt intensity with varying degrees of descriptions or intensities for each of those descriptions, and that's great. Now I need to comment on the yeast. Yeast, I smell some low sulfur, which is appropriate for the style. So if I know that, I can mark appropriate. And then some red apple, kind of like bruised pear. It's kind of like overripe pear. Very low overripe banana. Now we need to comment on other. For instance, do I think I smell coffee or rose hips or grapefruit like puree added to this? No, I don't smell anything or kind of really detect anything that would make me think that, so I'm going to leave it there. So that's my aroma, and if you look at the BJCP score sheet, you'll see that it says comment on malt, hop, yeast, and other. And I always want to ask myself, like, do I smell any off flavors? So I'll say, okay, diacetyl. Do I smell diacetyl? No. Do I smell oxidation? I get a very, very, very low, kind of like a rice paper or like just like paper quality. So it could show a touch of age on the beer. It's not overwhelming. Acetaldehyde, no. And then I don't get any other sort of characteristics that I would just consider an off flavor really in this point. I do smell some alcohol, but it's more like rose or kind of a spicy sort of characteristic. And I can write all those things down. So I could say, I detect on the nose a very low, alcohol sensation. Usually in the score sheet, I will skip appearance for now because I want to get to the flavor. I want to focus on the big stuff. Appearance is only 3 points out of 50, so it's not really my main thing. I definitely need to fill it out, but I want to stay focused on kind of where my mind is at with getting to really know this beer. So once again, I like to start with whatever the dominant characteristic is, and I'll describe that first. So if it was malt, I would start there. In this case, it's hops. The hop flavor overall, high. Well, I'm going to say medium high, and I'm going to focus on the bitterness because I always want to comment on bitterness. Bitterness is high, and the hop flavor itself is grapefruit peel, grapefruit juice, orange zest, pine, like really fresh pine, bits of like fresh oregano, fresh mint, fresh basil, very herbaceous, grassy, pretty awesome. I gotta say, it's like nice to experience something that's not afraid to show off bitterness. That's so like faux pas these days, and it's nice to have a beverage that trusts that I can be an adult and handle bitterness. Anyway, I digress once again. So that's what I'm perceiving here in terms of the hop flavor and the hop bitterness. Now we need to comment on the malts. Even though the hop was the main thing that stood out to me, I must comment on the malt as well. Malt, medium low, and low. I would say that's like low honey, dinner roll, biscuit, very low caramel. Always comment on the balance. I think balance is one of the most important things that we can think about when we're trying to assess a beer, especially if we're trying to assess if it's in the proper category or style, because I think every beer is the same. It's just where is the pivot foot in terms of, is this showcasing the malt or is it showcasing the hops? So balance, definitely hop leaning. And you know what? By the fact that I marked those intensities, I said high on the bitterness and medium high on the hop flavor. Then I said, medium low on the malt character. I think I might have switched that. Hop, it's high on the hops, medium low on the malt. That means I've already got the information I need to have a very clear statement of the balance on this is towards the hops. Now I need to comment on the yeast, and let's go back into there and think about the yeast characteristic. Low, red apple skin, very low peach, a very low alcohol flavor that's like, again, like the yingling or kind of spicy, peppery characteristics for alcohol. Then I need to comment on other. Okay, I don't detect any sort of other there. And I definitely need to comment on the aftertaste. And this has a lingering, like hop-derived, bitterness or astringency that is like very much like a grapefruit peel or an orange peel, and like pith. I think pith is a really good description. So that inside part of a citrus peel, especially grapefruit or orange in this case, and lingering pine. And then I go to the mouthfeel. So let's think about the carbonation. So I swish it around. I try to think, okay, of all the beers I've consumed in my life, where does that land on the carbonation level? Say medium low, just under the medium mark or just below the average mark. And again, it doesn't really persist that much. And then as far as the body, I would say medium low. And then as far as astringency, you always comment on that. I would say this is medium astringency, and definitely hop-derived, bitter, like isomerized alpha acid type astringency. And then I need to comment on alcohol warmth. Very low yet pleasant alcohol warmth, that is there. Creaminess, none. So now we can go back to appearance. And I would describe this as let me see if I can give you a good kind of equal representation of what I see in here versus what the camera is capturing, but very light straw, not quite gold, almost like Crayola crayon yellow. Bone white head that's fairly persistent. So, it poured pretty thick, and I can even like kind of top it off to see kind of what that looks like when I first pour it. So it pours maybe a one finger head initially, and then we have some nice lacing here. The description, I described the head in terms of like the color. I said bone white. Now I want to make sure I describe what it looks like. Is it frothy, foamy? Are there peaks? Are there really consistent tight bubbles? Are there variations in bubbles? I'd say if mostly consistent tight bubble with some very small fish eye bubbles, so little bubbles that come off the top and they look like little fish eyes sticking out. Kind of hard to capture on the camera, but you might catch some of that. The appearance, the clarity, very clear. So I've covered the main aspects of what we look for on appearance, and I've described where they fit. And then we go to the overall impression. Now, my advice for people who are learning how to become effective judges, this would be the first time where I start to think whether or not, or I try my best to make it, this is the first time where I start to think about whether or not this beer fits into the style. The way I try to approach it is for the first bits where I'm filling out all that form, so really the first like 8 minutes of assessing this beer, I am trying to be like a very good ethical crime detective. I'm just here to look in the room or, assess the crime scene, just collect data as far as what I perceive, what am I noticing? And I try to keep a very open mind to just capturing all the information I can, right? At this point, it's just data, and I want to be as accurate with my descriptive perception abilities as possible. Because I'm really just trying to build a description of what I'm seeing. And then when I get to the overall impression, that first sentence or two, this is where I finally start to think about, is this beer gonna fit into the category? And because that first sentence to me is, for me, like if I was in a really busy, popular, crowded beer bar and I'm serving beer, a customer approaches and they say, that beer sounds interesting, what's it like? I don't have 9 minutes to say, oh, well, the hop profile is medium high and it gets notes at da-da-da. I'm trying to think of like, okay, what's something that I can tell them, or even like write on my menu board or like on the chalkboard or just put on the screen as a description that's like very concise. What can I say about this beer that just wraps it up? I call it my elevator pitch for the beer. So let me try to do that here. A very dry, a very dry and refreshing, pale, hoppy beer. Okay, that's the first good stab, right? So like if I wrote that like this beer is a very dry, refreshing, pale, beer with lingering bitterness, something like that. If I write that, I go, okay, cool. I just described what this beer is. Then I start to think about, does that fit the description for this category? Now, if I was judging brown ales, then I would start to say, that first thing I wrote about this would be like, a very pale, hoppy beer, etc. That's just a statement. That's just me describing the beer. You brewed this, boom. And then I could say, this is a fantastic beer. I really enjoyed it, but this doesn't fit the brown ale category. For one, it should be brown. For second, I'm looking for more like chocolate or caramel, blah, blah, blah. And then I describe why it's going to get a very low score, even though the beer is delicious. Okay, I'm drinking literally one of the examples from the BJCP, so you kind of can't get more, to style, quote unquote. It generally fits the description of what we have noticed most English IPAs taste like. Overall impression for me is like the beauty thing that helps me as a judge help the brewer understand where they are on or off on the mark. 12C, English IPA, overall impression. A bitter, moderately strong, very well attenuated or dry, pale British ale with a dry finish and a hoppy aroma and flavor. Nailed it, right? That little elevator pitch that I wrote was exactly what this just said. So now I know I'm judging this beer that's like, okay, all my points now, because I don't assign points until the very, very end. And usually after I write that overall impression. So now I have this great framework for where does this beer fit? On the bottom left-hand side of the BJCP score sheet, there's going to be a little section that'll tell me, okay, this is a world-class example. It's like perfectly describes the beer style, no flaws, etc. I go, well, I need to make my score fit that because that's basically what I just experienced was a world-class example based on what I just read and everything else, right? So then I say, okay, now I just need to make the points fit that. Now, if I read that and it said, this beer was pretty good, but like there's a few things off with it that are wrong. Either they're serious off flavors or it's just missed the mark too much. Let's say, for instance, there was like a touch of like roastiness in there or something that like just didn't belong in the style, but otherwise it like kind of fit. I would then have to say, okay, it doesn't really quite fit. Okay, maybe it's only in the 32 point range. Then I go, cool, I make all my points fit to 32, right? And then the nice thing is I'll always use the overall to either help encourage a brewer who just needs a little extra like support, like maybe I just have to give this beer a 20 because it's got some off flavors, it's not in the right category, whatever. I have to score all the other things pretty, accurately. I have to be pretty honest with them, like, the color's wrong, you got 1 point out of 3 on the appearance. The aroma was like way off or had some off flavors. Okay, you're only gonna get like, basically a failing score on the aroma and maybe like a D+ on the flavor, etc. Right? Now, so if it seems like I feel like I'm being harsh, I can use my overall to say, well, I'm not gonna give them a 2 out of 10 overall. Maybe I'll give them a 6 or 7 overall to sort of say like, hey, this was pretty good. Like, you're on the right track or something like that, or let's say the beer was like amazing but just totally in the wrong category, so I have to kill it on the points like for the appearance and the aroma and the mouthfeel and flavor. I can give it like a 9 on the overall and say like, holy crud, this beer's amazing, or 8 or something. This beer's amazing, but just wrong category. Usually that's not really how it works because I'll use my words in that overall to like try to encourage and help kind of promote that brewer's ability to, most importantly, make a good beer. Really, maybe more important than that, I'll flip those like this. Maybe the most important is have fun while making beer. Maybe that's the most important. It is, right? Have fun with what you're doing with your hobby. How do you get the most out of it? You submitted a beer to a competition. That means you care about beer. You just need a little bit of guidance, and you were expecting me to give you some guidance. So I'm gonna help you. If I detect like there's definitely some issues with like fermentation profiles, I'd say, I don't know what you did here, but perhaps look into fermentation temperature control, or I'm detecting some off flavors related to like sanitation issues. So I detect like lactic acid or lactobacillus fermentation that's happening not supposed to in this style. Maybe just double check your sanitation protocols or reread the chapter and how to brew on sanitizing your equipment. I'll try to like leave some advice like that. Or if it's just like little minor style tweaks, I'd say, this beer's really great, and I probably would have given it 4 more points overall had the bitterness just been a little bit more intense, because the style guideline does say, you know, the general good examples for this style tend to have this level of bitterness and yours didn't. So maybe push that, or try to make the beer finish more dry so that the perceived bitterness goes up, etc. You know, there's all these like little levers we can tweak. But I try to give a few, you know, little pointers on the beer and explain, you know, justify like why I gave it that score. And that's that. So yeah, there we are. That's basically my approach for doing a score sheet. And if this is the first few times you've done a score sheet, if you're just studying for your initial BJCP exams or your Cicerone exams and you want to dive into the style guidelines, spending 15 to 20 minutes on a beer and really dissecting it along with me in these videos or with a group or with a buddy or two is a fantastic way of kind of walking through these beers. But eventually you want to get to the point where you can do everything that we just did, fill out to completion a good score sheet where you're filling out every line of the score sheet, commenting on each aspect of the beer in about 9 minutes, 9 to 12 minutes ideally. If you're doing for the exams, really you should hit the 12-minute mark maximum. So that's it. This is the Jaipur from, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. You know, I watched some Brits say it earlier and it sounded about right. It's a 5.9% IPA, India Pale Ale from Thornbridge. And this was for the BJCP English IPA, category 12C. Like the video, pretty please, and subscribe to the channel. We're going to start doing more beer reviews of stuff around Spain and around Europe, etc. But also some more of these kind of detailed IPA or not IPA, BJCP style breakdowns. So thanks again for watching, and leave a comment below. Let me know if you have any styles that you want me to go through next, and I'll focus on those. Otherwise, have a nice day. Ciao.